Hello, my name is Justin Yoon. I'm here to talk to you about the tensions between South Korea and Japan. Can you think of a word stronger than the word stubborn? Perhaps with a meaning similar to unable to move past an issue that has lasted for over a century? If so, you can probably describe the relationship between South Korea and Japan. Understanding this fragile relationship helps us better understand disputes around the world. This long-lasting tension has yet to be resolved. My curiosity on this topic came from hearing my parents' opinions of Japan, both of whom are Korean. To combat potential personal bias, I have done research on the internet and used mediabiasfactcheck.com to check all links for facts and bias. Throughout the slideshow, I will talk about relevant historical events, present issues, and the future. Our tension of interest begins in 1592, the Imjin Wars. Japanese warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi's dream of conquering Ming China. He asks Korean King Seonjo for passage, but the king refuses since Korea sends tribute to China. Two massive invasions would take place, leaving Korea victorious but in ruins. According to history expert Kalle Szymanski, Korea lost an estimated 1 million Korean soldiers and civilians, while Japan lost an estimated 100,000 Japanese soldiers. Fast forward a few centuries, we are brought to the doorstep of Korea's annexation. Korean royal family feuds and the rise of Meiji Japan would bring Korea closer to losing its independence. China's loss in the First Sino-Japanese War and Russia's loss in the Russo-Japanese War left Korea with no ally to combat Japan's aggression. Ultimately, on August 1910, the Treaty of Annexation was signed, and all Korean authority was handed to Japanese rule. For 35 years, Japan ruled over Korea. Koreans were denied the freedom of speech and forced to assimilate the Japanese culture. On March 1st, 1919, 2 million Koreans protested peacefully for independence, but met violent Japanese military suppression. As second-class citizens of the empire, Koreans fought for Japan, entered forced labor, and became sex slaves, also known as comfort women. The Allied victory of World War II dissolved the Empire of Japan and led to the liberation of Korea. The Treaty of Peace allowed Korea to officially regain independence on September 1951. The Treaty of Basic Relations between Japan and the Republic of Korea established friendly relations in 1965. This long name, in short known as the 1965 Agreement, made Japan send economic compensation to South Korea. Now that we have learned about their past, I will discuss present issues. One such issue involves comfort women. In 2015, Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida sends $8.3 million worth of yen to comfort women survivors and apologized on behalf of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Pyoung-se accepts. Unfortunately, this agreement failed to address the Japanese government's ignorance to its own war crimes and involved the proposed removal of comfort women statues. South Korean President Moon Jae-in listens to activists and announced to disregard the agreement. There are many comfort women statues. One such statue is on the slide itself. These memorialize comfort women and can be found all over the world, including the United States, Australia, and Germany. The most controversial one sits facing the Japanese embassy in Seoul. NPR reported that the Japanese government asked to take down these statues, denied the existence of the program of comfort women, and claimed that these women volunteered themselves. More statues were placed to raise awareness of the survivors, who number fewer than a dozen today. In an unexpected turn of events, the South Korean Supreme Court ruled in 2018 against a lawsuit for Japan to compensate for comfort women. This contradicts a case of the same year on forced laborers. Compensation of Korean forced laborers is another issue. In 2018, the South Korean Supreme Court ruled that Japanese companies must recompense victims of wartime labor, citing the 1965 agreement. Japan also cites the 1965 agreement, stating that all claims between Korea and Japan are, quote, settled completely and finally, end quote. Additionally, Japan restricts exports to South Korea the next year, leading to boycotts and protests on both sides. While South Korea seeks Japan to properly atone for its crimes, Japan has its own reasons for its hesitant attitude on improving relations. The court case against Japanese companies and Moon's rejection of the 2015 agreement made Japan feel cautious to trust Korea. Japanese Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide has seen policies reverse with new Korean administrations, and Moon is about to end his term. Suga also faces the lower house elections, and considering Japan's negative view towards Korea, compromise with Korea may risk his career. Now that we have a taste of today's bitter disputes, I will talk about how Korea and Japan affect each other's future. Economics is one part of their future. Stefan Ezel of the ITIF reports that Japan supplies a large portion of chemical imports for South Korea's semiconductor industry. South Korea also contributes greatly to Japan's consumer-driven industries. Despite their differences, South Korea and Japan rely on each other economically. This healthy relationship benefits not only the two Asian countries, but their powerful ally, the United States. The US depends on their cooperation to effectively observe Chinese and North Korean military activities. The US also needs both of them to successfully counter China's state-directed capitalism. Fortunately, there is hope for South Korea and Japan. Suga's first phone call with Moon addressed a need to improve relations, saying, quote, "We cannot allow our relations to remain as they are," end quote. And after they both quickly embraced Joe Biden's victory in the presidential election and hearing his message of rebuilding alliances, South Korea and Japan began discussions of cooperation on the Tokyo Olympics, on the COVID-19 pandemic response, and sports and cultural exchange. I talked about historical events, current issues, and the future of this relationship between South Korea and Japan. I don't need to explain all of their disputes to prove the existence of their toxic relationship, but hopefully one day the two countries no longer see each other as stubborn rivals, but like-minded individuals. Only through taking responsibility, setting aside differences, and fostering better cooperation will Northeast Asia see a brighter future. Only through these actions will all of us see a brighter future. Thank you.